Hey, this is Norm Sash with Hunter Tools, and I thought it would be an interesting study to take a page that looks good on a high definition monitor, for instance, a 1920 by 1080 resolution monitor or a monitor that's set with that resolution, and see what that page would look like on a monitor that's set for very high resolution. This doesn't really have to do with the physical size of the monitor. Rather, it has to do with what is the resolution settings on that monitor. So I have a web page here, and if I scroll down through this page, we just kind of scroll through it fairly quickly. You can see everything looks good. This is set to, I think, 1920 by 1080, and it all looks good on that this layout. However, if I then go over into some of my dev tools and switch this monitor, and you can see right here, I'll go ahead and change this. You can see I'm setting it to Lenovo Yoga, which has a resolution of 3840 by 2160, and this is what I'm going to set the resolution to for this display. And then if I go and look at this same page, you'll notice the hero section here looks good. However, if I scroll down this page, the very first thing you can see is this section that comes right after the hero section is boxed in and doesn't look right. We have another section here that looks good. And if I scroll down further, I've got a section here that doesn't look good. So as I'm going down through this page, you can see I've got various sections that just don't line up well, don't fit well onto a high resolution setting monitor. So in this case study, I'm just going to go through and sort of be ad hoc with this. I'm just going to kind of go through my thought processes as to what I would look at to fix this page and where I would start. And there will be some issues on this page. For instance, I can look right here and I can see, maybe fonts down here in this subscription form aren't scaling properly. These fonts are scaling good, but these fonts are not scaling very well. Some of these issues I'm not going to address right now. They might be a good topic for a different video. But what I want to focus on in this video is just the general layout and getting the layout so that it looks proper on a high resolution setting. So with that, let's jump into it. And the first thing I'm going to look at on this, so I have the hero section looks good, but then if you recall, the section right after the hero doesn't look well. So we're going to go and take a look at that. So this site is edited in Beaver Builder and built with Beaver Builder and Power Pack. That's what I use an awful lot on sites. So I'm going to drop into my Beaver Builder editor, and let's go ahead and we know that this hero section right here is good. So the first thing I'm going to do is go and look at the row settings for this hero section. And when I take a look at that, I'm going to see that the width is set to full width. So it's going to go from side to side. And also the content is set to full width. So since I know this one is good, let's go to the next row, which is down here. This area, we know that these did not come across well. I'm going to go ahead and choose this one. This choose the right path, or choose the path that's right for you. And well, before I do that, let me just jump into the responsive again and take a look at this. You'll see Creative Mystic is stacked, and there's no reason for that to be stacked. There's plenty of space on either side. And this section right here, this info section, is also stacked. So let's see if we can fix that. I'm going to go into this one right here, and I'm going to go to the row settings here and take a look, see what we got. So in this case, the width, here's the problem I can see right away. The width is specified to fixed, and the fixed width is set to 1200 pixels. So what that means, if I cancel out of that, I'll go back into the responsive settings. What that means is this row is going to have a fixed width for the content, and that fixed width is going to be no wider than 1200 pixels. If I have my font right here set to be scalable, which I do on this site, so as the resolution becomes higher, the font and the screen becomes bigger, the font also becomes bigger, so that it scales with the resolution of the site. So this font scales larger, which means then that the 1200 pixels is fixed, so it can't expand beyond these borders right here. If I drew a border on this, let me see if I can do that. Let me go ahead and highlight something here. Okay, you can see this blue outline here. That's going to be kind of my container width for that title, Creative Mystic. That's going to be the container width. Any words have to fit within the side, that box from left to right. So I will go back to my normal settings here. Oops, I got to scroll up here. And so my guess is a quick fix for this is simply going to be changing it from a fixed width, and I can do it in view widths or percentage, and these are different things that we will talk about here. I could just simply change this to full width, and when I change it to full width, then you'll see that the row now goes completely side to side. I've got my content width at 1200 pixels. That's being scaled for this monitor here. So I think just changing the width on this row and making this row a full width row rather than a fixed width row is going to resolve the issue. But let's just take a look here. Let's go back and look at this and say, oh, no, that still didn't do it. And the reason that it didn't do it is my row is now at 1200 pixels, or excuse me, my row is now full width, but the content column, the content of that's within that column is still set to 1200 pixels. So it's not going to go beyond this box. And the way I would fix that again is go back out of this. I would go back into my row settings, and then for the row settings I'm going to make this full width for the content width. So both the row is full width and the content is full width. We'll go ahead and save that, and then we'll go and look at our scaling on it one more time. Now you can see with the scaling that this section works. We just fixed the Creative Mystic. We haven't fixed anything else, but we just fixed this heading in here. Let me just get back over this, and you can see when I highlight in this area that now my borders go all the way over. So those are the settings that we're going to want to make probably for all of these additional rows that are there. I'm going to go ahead and do this next one just to show that that works. So I'll take it out of high res mode for a minute here. Let me cancel out of this. So now I need to go down to this row. I'll take this row and set it to be, it is already full width, but the content width is fixed at 1200. So I'm going to make the content at full width. And we'll go ahead and save this, and then we'll go back into high res once more time so we can take a look and see if that fixed the issue. And sure enough, there it is. That fixed the issue. So I'm going to wind up going through the rest of this just to make some fixes, and I'll, if I happen to find something that's interesting, I'll break in, but I don't want to keep everyone online here while I do all of the tedious work, which that's pretty much what it is. It's going to be just tedious work going through and setting all of this stuff. However, I think before I do that, one of the issues that we're going to have is this area. If you notice, I'm in this area and the text kind of strings out here because this is set at full width for this section. I don't really like the looks of that, especially on a large monitor. I'd kind of like to see this have some more white space out on the sides. So I'll show you a couple ways of dealing with that. Okay, so let's take another look at this. So the issue that we have is that when this was set to full width for the content, it tended to, depending on what line, what text you have in here, stretch out to the very edge, which didn't look good. It's nicer to have some white space in here and use this, or to break it up and to make it look aesthetically better. So we want to create this white space on both sides, and there's two ways to do that. And the first way, we'll go back into row settings here. When we come down here, instead of making the content full width again, let's take the content and make it fixed. Now we know we have a problem if that's set to 1200 pixels because it's going to box that content in there, and we don't really want that at 1200 pixels. And it's not scalable. It's, when you set it fixed to 1200 pixels, that's what it's going to be, no matter what the size or the resolution of the monitor. The better way to go with this is if we drop this down, and again, this is using Beaver Builder. Other page builders may have similar types of settings. The first option is VW. So if we set this to VW, we're going to go, it's going to come up, and we want to set this then to some view width to give that's less than 100. So VW is the width of the browser window. So if we set this to some value that is less than 100, 100 would be the full width of the browser window. If we set it to that, it's going to contain it in a box that's sort of like a percentage. It's somewhat similar to percentage, but it's not exactly. Well, let's set this at 80. So basically I'm saying 80% of the view window width is what I want to set that to. And you'll notice right away it comes out and it gives us some space on both sides here. And if I look at our high res setting, you'll see even in the high res setting, I have some nice white space on both sides here. That makes this text and everything just look nicer and easier to read. The problem that we have, and they're two very similar settings, is VW and percentage. View width is the width of the entire browser window. So that goes from edge. If I go out over to this side, could probably have a scroll bar over here, what it's doing is it's setting the width of the content to 80% of that entire width. What I would rather do is say, hey, I only want to pay attention to the width of my row. And my row is set to be 100% from side to side of this window that I'm in. I'm going to set this row, instead of it being fixed to the view portal width, I'm going to make it 80%, and I'll just set this to percent, and that makes it 80% of the display window, effectively. I'm going to call it just whatever you're displaying, the content window. It's going to make it 80% of that content window. So right away we see that this line now just started wrapping, and that's because the percentage is slightly less, so there's slightly less room for this. And that's going to be something that it's hard to deal with, because some monitors, some display resolutions, it's going to wrap. There's just nothing you can do about it. But what I would want to do maybe is go in here, and again, I could modify this. I could go back into the row setting. I kind of like 80% there. I could change it to say 90%. If I change this to 90% for the view, and that looks okay. I've still got a decent amount of white space on both sides. The content, like depending upon how these letters and words line up, could go out as far as this blue line right here, my box container. That still leaves me with some white space on both sides here. If I go down to 80% on it, and I want to keep these consistent, so you can't just pay attention to one single row, because you don't want one row being 80% and the next row being 70% and the next row being 90% and back and forth. You just kind of want to look at this and say, hey, what's a good compromise thing here? So I'm going to say, let's just see what 80% looks like again. Maybe I'll just do 85%. We have, again, I've got a reasonable amount of space on both sides. White space. If I go into my high-res view of it, you can see I've got pretty much the same view here. Text is laid out nice. I've got white space on both sides. So I'm going to stick with that for right now. And again, what I'm going to do is put this video on pause while I go through and adjust the rest of the pages to this 85% and see how well that looks on the overall design of the page. Okay, I am finished editing this, and in standard high def you can see that the page looks pretty decent. Everything, so I just scroll through it, everything looks relatively okay. Now I'm going to go to very high definition or resolution on this. We'll switch over to that. So this is what my window is going to look like. And if I scroll down through it right now, you can see that things are looking much, much better. Yeah, that's a lot better than the way it was before. There's still little issues here and there that I need to address. That's outside the scope of this video, though. I'm just going to kind of deal with this layout and fix all these other little issues here and there. Like here's an issue with the slider and such on that I'll have to deal with. But everything's looking pretty good. Now, I did want to show you one final thing to look at here. And that is on these row settings. If you remember, I said, okay, well, we can go through it. We can look at a row. We can come to this row, and in the row settings, change it to be full width. And by the way, full width meaning that if you have something like an image or a color in the background of the row, it's going to go from the edge of the row to the edge of the row, to left to right, full width. If I happen to change something like that, so for example, let me go to this row right here with the hero image on it because I've got something in the background there. If I change this row setting, instead of full width, I make it fixed width. And my width right now is set to 1200 pixels on that fixed width, 800. You can see then that this row will only go out to 800 pixels on the row. So any background color or background image that you have set in the row will fit within this container. This is what's called a box, like a boxed layout. And then the page background will be behind it on both sides. So you can limit your content width that way. In this particular design, in this site, we want the colors and the backgrounds to all extend both left and right to the edge. So I'm going to make this full width, and that's going to take and push that out to be full width. And then the other thing you'll notice, we went down to the content width area, and in the content width area we set that to a percentage. So if I go back down to this row here, if I go to the settings on this row, we had set the content width to be fixed, and then we had set it to a value of 80. So we had put in something like 80 right here. Now you'll notice on this display, or in this setting, I can X out, just delete the 80, and this is Beaver Builder specific. If I get rid of that, you can see I got a gray 80 behind it. Okay, what that means is it's inheriting that value from somewhere else. And rather than going through and setting it to an explicit value of 80 from each row setting, what you can do is go into from the upper left, you bring in your tools and go to global settings here in Beaver Builder. And then in global settings, I can come down here to my max width. So I'm setting my default width to full width on the row. I'm setting the default content to be fixed, and I'm setting it to be a fixed value of 80%. I could change this right here, and just to make a big difference, I'll put it to 60% as the default value and then save that. And what you'll see then, you'll notice I set it to 60%. So my content here now has got a 20% margin on the left and a 20% on the right. It's boxed in more. So rather than having to set it on each individual row, like this row here is explicitly set to a full width, so it goes all the way across with this content. But I can simply come up to my Beaver Builder settings, and I need to get out of high res so you can see this. I can simply come up here, go to global settings, change my global setting to another value, I'll say 85%, and then save that. And anywhere where we have not explicitly overridden the default, it will now set the content width to the 85%. So if I now go into my high-res display, you can now see that, for instance, this content area here now has changed quite a bit. It used to be, contained with about 20% of the window width on both sides. Now it's at 85%, so it's 12.5%, I think, on both sides. So that's just a little tip. And that's a fix for this. Again, as a case study, it doesn't fix all the problems on the page, but I just wanted to go through and show you some of the ways of addressing this for a very high-res display.